We are at the 2022 FS Ag Roundtable, and we are looking forward to a good couple of hours with a wonderful panel. Our partners today, of course, include our corporate partner, Growmark FS, Midwest Bank, Big River Resources, Elliott Brothers Seed Company, Pivot Bio, Monmouth College, OSF Holy Family, Warren-Henderson Farm Bureau, Compeer Financial, Martin Tractor Incorporated, A. Eugene Miller Agency, and the Patent Block Grill and Brew Pub. We're going to jump right in and we're going to meet our panelists. I would like to also say today we are dedicating this Ag Roundtable goes out to longtime listener and good friend of the radio station who passed away recently, Mr. Paul Crandall. So in dedication to him and his farming legacy in this community, today's roundtable dedicated to Paul Crandall. So let's start with our co-moderator, Mr. DeLoss Jahnke.
Hi,
How
Vanessa.
you doing, buddy?
Very good. Always appreciate the invitation. Always glad to be out here, and beautiful day. And listen on the way in. Sounded great on the radio. So another good job ahead of during Prime Beef Festival.
Yes, it's because of Prime Beef Festival. Our lunch today will be from the Patent Block Grill and Brew Pub. We're having burgers.
That sounds good. I'll even more glad than I got the invitation. Thank you very much.
All right, DeLoss, it's good to see you. Glad to have you here. Special guest today, who was our keynote speaker at this morning's FS breakfast, it is Lauren Lurkins. She is our Director of Environmental Policy with the Illinois Farm Bureau. Welcome to the roundtable.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you here. What'd you learn from the breakfast this morning?
Well, there was a huge crowd for breakfast, which I'm not normally used to, so that was very exciting. But a lot of good reaction to the work that Illinois Farm Bureau does in a lot of areas, including our environmental policy, especially with some of the friends we have in our General Assembly here around the table today.
Well, I'm so glad you were here. I got a chance to talk to some of the FFA students and the royalty. Some of those young ladies are looking at law as a career, some in possibly communications, corporate law. So they were really talking about your inspiration today and getting to hear from you.
Yeah, I was really impressed. They came up afterwards and introduced themselves, and I always think that the world needs one more lawyer. But the world needs lawyers that think about, a farmer perspective and advocacy in particular. So I was really excited to have those conversations. I'm sure we'll have more.
Okay. Lauren Lurkins with us. Chris Gavin, our longtime partner as well, who is president with Midwest Bank. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
It's good to be here. It's another beautiful day in downtown Monmouth, and great time of year with the festival going on, and had a nice parade and great breakfast this morning. And I was just thinking that, yeah, we could use a lot more lawyers as long as they're like Lauren.
Right.
So.
Exactly. All right. Also with us this morning, State Representative Dan Swanson. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Vanessa. Always a pleasure to be here, and it's just wonderful to be surrounded by such knowledge in this room once again today. It's when you look around the table and see the people here represented and the businesses they represent, it's exciting. I learn something every time I'm here.
How are your crops looking?
Pretty good, looking real well. Walked some cornfields, some bean fields, and still quite a ways away from doing any harvest, but I think we're going to be pleased when we get out there. So kind of looking forward to it.
Okay, good. Ron Moore is with us. He is the chairman of the American Soybean Association, past president of the Illinois Soybean Association, and is going to be making an announcement. He's already made it on the radio once, but for those that don't know, welcome, Ron, and I hope that you plan on still being with us as we continue with these roundtables.
Yeah, well, thanks, Vanessa. I'm great to be here again, and yes, this is my last few months on the American Soybean Association Board of Directors, and as long as you keep inviting me, I'll keep coming back.
All right, that's good to know. How are your crops looking?
Where we live, right south of Monmouth, it looks pretty good. But we've got a farm southwest of Roseville that has missed most of the rains this summer. One of the fellows that lives down there said they'd only had an inch of rain in July and August so far. So those crops are suffering right now. But we had a good run up until this last few weeks in August, and so we've been dry. But I think we're going to have a good crop. It may not be a record, but it's going to be a good crop.
Okay, thank you very much. Another corporate sponsor with us, partner, is Brendan Marshall, who is with West Central FS and Growmark. Welcome, Brendan.
Thank you, Vanessa. I look forward to this every time.
How are your customers' crops faring this year?
So They look good. It's a lot better than it was a year ago right now, I can say. Ron's a customer of mine, and he's right. I mean, it varies in Warren County where I'm at. Northern half of the county has caught about every rainstorm that's come through, and then you move south and it seems to miss. Monmouth is kind of the line. But right now I'm very optimistic. I mean, the disease has been held back really good this year, and so things look good. Just knock on wood.
All right, thanks, Brendan. State Representative Norine Hammond with us. Welcome back, longtime member of the panel.
Thanks, Vanessa. It's always great to be here and joining this fine group of people, and it is just a great opportunity for me, and I'm sure my colleagues feel the same. We don't get this very often in very many areas of the state, so I'm very happy that we can take advantage of it.
Yes, and remind folks what committees you sit on.
So I currently sit on the Human Services Committee, Consumer Protection Committee, which is always kind of an interesting one when it comes to these topics here. Also Higher Education, and there's about 4 others that I can't recall right now. I'm also the co-chair for the Council of State Governments Ag and Natural Resources Committee, and the president for the State Ag and Rural Leaders Group, which includes all 50 states and 8 Canadian provinces.
Okay, thank you very much, Norine. Also with this newcomer, it is David Zimmerman. He's the new president and CEO at Big River Resources, one of our sponsors and partners of this event. Welcome, David.
Hi, thank you for the invite, Vanessa.
How are things faring so far?
Well, really well, really well. You know, locally we're in very good shape, but we do crush corn in Wisconsin, northeast Iowa, southeast Iowa, and we're really happy with the corn crop we've got coming on. Now, there are some tough spots for sure. The last 2 to 3 weeks, we could have used a little more rain to fill that kernel, but we're pretty happy with what we're seeing so far. We are starting to see some new crop come across the scales.
Okay. Well, we look forward to having you here.
Thank you.
Ken McMillan with us, Warren-Henderson Farm Bureau Board. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, and I'm pleased to be here, and one of the reasons I'm here is because Jake Armstrong, the president, has more important things to do. Within the last 24 hours, he became a new father of a baby boy that I'm sure they're going to be fitting for an FFA jacket as soon as they can.
Fantastic. Congratulations to the Armstrong family. And what you guys don't know is we have a surprise for you because of Ron's retirement with the ASA, and it's your birthday weekend celebration, Mr. McMillan.
Yes.
Amy Thompson made us desserts today to celebrate both of you.
Ooh. There should be 80 of them, right?
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Dwayne Bonifer with us, one of the vice presidents with Monmouth College. Welcome, Dwayne.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Great to be here.
You guys are very interested in being a part of listening to the programs and looking at agriculture opportunities as classroom lectures and or particular majors in the future.
Also have a big speaker coming up on Monday night to celebrate agriculture as well. Looking forward to having Mike Adams on campus, the 6th annual Wistful Robeson Lecture, 7 o'clock. Hope to see people there over at the Dahl Chapel and Auditorium to hear what's going to be a great talk.
It sounds good. Thank you for being here, Dwayne. Rob Elliott is with us, who is also serving on the Illinois Corn Marketing Board, past Illinois Corn Growers Association as well. Hi, Rob.
Thank you, Vanessa, for including us again here. Certainly, it's always a pleasure, and look forward to the opportunity to be part of this kind of forum. Certainly, as always, no lack of issues, and certainly, Prime Beef Festival Week is always a great kickoff to the start of harvest. There was a point in time that the Prime Beef Festival was held right outside the windows on the public square here, a little before my time, but certainly always a great event, and we're probably fortunate to live where we live here in Warren County with some of the background on the crop prospects that the guys already outlined. So thank you again.
Okay. And yes, we had Jeff Rankin, college historian from Monmouth, on last week. That story's online. It began began in 1948 right out here on the public square, including 4 spits for the barbecue, the steers themselves, so you can read more about that. Senator Neil Anderson, another newcomer with us. Welcome, Senator.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Been part of a lot of ag roundtables, none down this way, but yeah, looking forward to it. Looks like a good group of different backgrounds, so hopefully we can get a lot of questions answered and get a lot of good ideas for us to take down to Springfield.
Okay, let's go ahead and jump in. First topic is crop prospects and expectations to include commodity price trends. Where would you like to start with this one? Rob, would you like to start us out, sir?
Sure. I think the guys talked about crop prospects a little bit here earlier, but in my mind, we could probably characterize it as one as variability, kind of depending on where you lived and what the rainfall patterns were. I think we probably have a pretty good crop going, but maybe not quite as robust as maybe what USDA first thought. So I say that to help prop up prices and keep them going upwards. So.
And Chris Gavin, you can certainly talk to us about commodity price trends and what the expectations will be, and kind of give us an idea of interest rates, as that's been a big topic throughout the year.
Yes, interest rates certainly have surprised us. I think in the banking industry, we have always tried to plan for a rapid increase in rates, and we test for it all the time and do simulations. But it's been a long time since we've seen interest rates move like this. So, yeah. So it looks like that the Fed's they're gonna raise another 75 basis points later this month. That's kind of a given now. They give it a 75% probability roughly, and then another increase most likely by the end of the year as well. So. I know that earlier in the year, probably just, I would say 60 days ago, the prospects were that the Fed might not do a full 75 basis points in September. That's changed, and I think what's changed is not only the inflation fears, but just the recent legislation that is supposed to be designed to help curb inflation. I think the Federal Reserve is reading it the other way. And even the new proposed student loan forgiveness, those things are both inflationary, as what the market sees as inflationary. So I think the Fed feels like they may have to do some extra work. So.
Okay. Ron, how does this impact your farm as you hear this information?
Well, it's relatively depressing. Yeah, it just, I have a mortgage on some of the land that we bought, and every time Jerome Powell raises interest rates, I get a letter the next day. So they must have that letter all printed out, ready to go, that tells me my interest rate is going up. I kind of jokingly say it's enough. You don't need to have that letter ready to go as soon as the Fed raises interest rates. But it's just one of those input costs that's has been going up and will continue to go up until we get recession slowed down and back to a normal, GDP growth of 1 or 2%. Right now, it's just not good for anything, just along with the rest of the input prices.
Ron, if there was is there a number right now that would be the right margin for a farmer? Because you've got these prices that may go up, but your margins aren't necessarily showing that because of your input costs.
Yeah, normally in agriculture, 2.5–3% return off of your investment is been historically, in my mind, what we've been looking at. Back when I first started farming, you grossed $400 on corn and $350 on soybeans, and now it's 3 and 4 times that. But the risk that we bear has gone up even greater than that 3 or 4 times, because when you're spending $1,000 to $1,200 on a corn crop, the risk of outside influences increasing your inputs and reducing your price is much greater. And so it's a scary thought as you look forward. Thank goodness we still have $6 plus corn and $14 beans. So we can weather that, but I'm concerned about what happens when we have 3 or 4 years of record crops in a row and a surplus of commodities. Where is that going to go? Because I don't know that the input prices will come down as quick as the price of soybeans and corn.
Chris, I was curious, given interest rates, given supply chain, like you talk about $6.50 corn, and you normally think, well, there might be some equipment purchases, might buy a new pickup or something like that after a year like that if you have a pretty good crop, but supply chain, there may not be a truck to buy. Interest rates, there may not be as many purchases, as many loans, many 5-year notes. So how do you forecast for the uncertainty that we have going on right now?
Yeah, as I said, I referenced earlier, it's been very difficult because we were in a very stable period for a long time. For 4 or 5 years, we just didn't have much going on, and so, and even prior to that, we didn't see moves like this. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I definitely feel like this. We had these high prices, but there's much more hesitancy right now on the farmer side to go out and invest. We saw a lot more investment the last time around that we had the higher prices, probably 2012-14 range, I think. We just saw a lot more money invested out there on the farm. So I think people are very concerned this time, being more conservative, and it is hard to get. I believe there's still combines and sitting on a lot up in Moline, Illinois, where the old racetrack used to be, that are waiting on computer chips. So I think that's still an issue as well. Can you get it? Do you want to buy it? And I think machinery prices, iron in general, is still really, really high than what we've seen at farm sales. So that's another factor.
In your experience, Ron, the costs tend to be stickier than the prospects for commodity prices staying at a certain level.
Yeah, so we've had a nice run up in prices on our commodities we raised, but give me my timeline here, but 3 crops ago we paid $370 or $80 a ton for anhydrous. I just booked anhydrous for next year at $11.70 or so a ton.
Better than I thought you were going to say.
Yeah.
But it's still 3 times as much.
3 times as much, and the spot price I think is on up $200 a ton, so it's over. Last I saw was $1,300 a ton for anhydrous for if you want to buy it now. Our risk has gone up exponentially greater than the price that we receive for our products. So your question about the margins, I don't know. My margins keep getting narrower as my inputs get higher.
Brendan, it has to flip-flop to you now on inputs, but I was reading from the Farm Policy News at the University of Illinois that nitrogen prices are also being impacted by things happening on another continent, up in Europe, and no time in the future have they given us a timeline of when fertilizer prices might come down.
So yeah, I mean, the craziest thing that what I deal with right now is the nitrogen piece, and it's on a daily basis that it just, we started off, last spring peaking out at a really high price on nitrogen, and then came down around side dress and through the summer, and then all of a sudden, just unbeknownst in July, it started when terminals or the manufacturers started allowing forward contracting, that they started raising right away. But in the same token, from what I understand is companies like myself, we went in and started buying and then turned around and contracted to customers. And it was happening quicker than I think that what manufacturers wanted to happen, so they started raising prices to try to slow things down. But it didn't work, and so now it's probably maxed out. But and it's such a crazy thing is that, with like nitrogen or fertilizer prices, it only takes one hurricane right now to get into the Gulf of Mexico or get close to New Orleans or NOLA, and then things just start going nuts again. And that happened last year with fertilizer when it went in there and wrecked the ports down there. And then you had fertilizer that's been waiting to come up the Mississippi River that couldn't make it because it drowned out barges and things like that. So.
And David Zimmerman, your turn to weigh in, because obviously you're a main component of what farmers need, that being at your facilities to crush and DDGs and the whole 9 yards with your products.
Yeah, just continuing on the ammonia thread here, the natural gas is really, really going to be the major input cost, and we've seen natural gas, go from $3.50 per MMBTU to $9 to $10. So you've had a tripling of that input cost, and that's directly reflected in the ammonia cost.
Lauren Lurkins, if you would mind weighing in, because listening to what you discussed this morning at the Farmers Breakfast, you are trying to advocate for farmers because there could be costs around the corner involving different aspects of new legislation, such as electrifying certain vehicles, carbon capture. Those things will be playing a role in farmers' commodity trends as well.
Right. So I was actually thinking about what I read over the summer around the July 4th holiday, the Purdue Ag Barometer, and I think they were looking at the top concerns for farmers across the Midwest. 43% of them were concerned about input prices, 21% concerned about input availability, 18% on government policies. So those are all very relevant for this conversation. And I think even though we're now into the fall, those sentiments are still very strong, as we're hearing about today. Over the late fall, early winter of this year, we heard very loud and clear from our membership across the state that this was a concern on the prices and the availability. So we started having additional conversations with economists and also folks within the fertilizer companies saying, okay, well, what is the end in sight? What does this look like? We also took that conversation with others to DC. I think what we are looking for coming out of USDA is a grant program. It doesn't solve, world conflicts and supply chain issues, but I think it'll be interesting to see what comes out of USDA, $500 million in a fertilizer grant program that should be coming out late summer. So we're looking for that anytime soon. All the buzzwords in the announcement, but GHG, American made, things like that. So I know there will be some role that innovation can play, but I think, we'd like to be able to partner on some projects just to bring some relief, if at all possible.
She referenced the Purdue Barometer, Purdue CME Group Ag Economy Barometer, and I interview them each month when it's released, and there is on RFD Profit Watch, which you have here on the WRAM. And I remember talking to Jim Minard at Purdue about that, saying, the idea of the price of corn and the reflection on the barometer. And he was told, when they've been doing this 6 years, and when they started doing it, they had people tell them there's no need to have a barometer because you just take the price of corn and it will just be linear. If the price of corn is good, the barometer will be high. If the price of corn is bad, the barometer will be low. And here we have 650 corn, and the barometer is nowhere close to where it was 2 years ago. In 2020, it was at record highs, and now it's not at a record low by any means, but it's not exactly rosy compared to previous times. And going back to what Ron was talking about with the risk and the uncertainty being so prevalent right now, that it really does weigh on what people want to do, and it's especially it affects both current and future expectations, which they gauge.
And Ken McMillan, who has also served on many different ag in legislative process as well, you've seen trends before. Have you seen this trend with inflation, with the prices in agriculture? 80s maybe?
I don't think we've seen anything like the uncertainty that we face now. And part of that is, and this probably gets into my political views, but I don't think the leaders in either party, and I think there's good evidence of that, don't really understand how much the uncertainty affects agriculture. For years, farm programs have basically meant agriculture came together, and we've provided some measure of stability and some means of dealing with all of the uncertainty. And it's usually been done on a bipartisan basis. And the thing I see this year is with that $90 billion that was passed, we're at the place where politicians of both parties will use farmers when they can, and then blame farmers when that's in their best interest. And that creates a great deal of uncertainty. Normally, the farm programs have been the result of Republicans and Democrats coming together, coming up with some changes each time that the Farm Bill comes up, but basically by working together. And this time we have a wild card out there, and I'm afraid that's going to really screw up the negotiations for the next Farm Bill. And you add into that the inflation uncertainties, the war uncertainties, and everything else, and I think it's going to be a very difficult time. It's going to be very important for Farm Bureau, the farm organizations, and so forth to really be on top of what's going to be happening.
Representative Dan Swanson, your thoughts on the commentary so far?
Yeah, my thoughts. I think we've missed one other component, and that's the transportation side of what it's costing to move our materials to the ethanol plants or move our materials across the United States. And with the uncertainty too with the transportation, that can play a wild card in here too. Talking with some of my Burlington Northern friends, they're talking about possible strike next Friday. The cooling off period that they're currently in for contract negotiations ends next Friday. And boy, if they happen to walk out, that shuts us all down with how long can we store products at an ethanol plant before we need to move the product? Or, how long can we survive without moving through the rail system? So, that's kind of out there on the radar at the national level. And they were talking about it could cost $2 billion a day if they're shut down, $2 billion a day. And a couple things they're fighting for is a two-man crew, shutting down a rail, only having one person in a train, and some of these trains now are as long as 22,000 feet, 4 miles long. And that's why we're sitting longer at the crossroads waiting for trains to go by, because they're parking to allow another train to go past that's longer than them. So a lot of uncertainties of where this is going to go. Of course, the federal government could step in again and say, well, let's extend the cooling off period. But for how long? 30 days? That's still in the middle of harvest. 60 days? Well, that's when we're trying to move crops still. So something out there, too, is that the transportation not only is over the road, but over the rail. That could play a major impact in our fall harvest season.
David Zimmerman from Big River Resources.
Yeah, Dan is spot on here. I mean, as we sit here today, even before the potential strike would unfold, we have a facility in Dyersville, Iowa that I was just on a conference call right before I got in here that we're facing potentially what we call a hot idle situation as we wait for an empty rail unit to arrive back at our facility. If we were to see this strike unfold, and Dan and I had a conversation about this earlier, it would take about 5 days, and our facility in Galva is full of finished product, which means we're essentially unable to dump corn at that point. So it's a real situation. I think the Presidential Emergency Board put out some good recommendations, and I know they have, I think, 5 of the 12 unions on board, but you need 7 more. So there's still a lift here, and it's very concerning.
So in that kind of scenario, you would say, well, the corn price, would it have an impact on the Chicago Board of Trade? May or may not. But when it comes to selling to my local elevator, my local end user, my ethanol plant, all of a sudden we can't take corn right now. So you went from $6.50 corn to having no market, potentially, overnight, or in a very short period of time.
Rob Elliott with the Illinois Corn Marketing Board and past Illinois Corn Growers Association president. How does that fare?
Wow, this is a complex topic, and we're in a world today where inflation and recession and all those things kind of are coming into play. But anytime you get high commodity prices, you always see goofy things that seem to happen in the marketplace. And as long as we can stay as farmers on the right side of the equation, we're fine. But everybody wants a piece of that potential profitability. And when you get on the wrong side of the market, it can be fairly disastrous. We're really lucky and fortunate that the ethanol industry, as well as emerging world economies, have got a buck to spend, and we've had good exports and trade and that kind of thing that have helped prop up these markets. But if we get in the wrong place here, and I think as we mentioned last time, I asked Ken McMillan about the 80s. I lived through 24% interest, 4 kids, and $1.90 corn, and having to tell my wife, you better hurry up and go to town and buy the new tennis shoes because they'll they'll cost twice as much tomorrow as they do today. And we're kind of reliving a little bit of those times with a little bit different set of conditions to go with them. So let's keep our fingers crossed. So
Were the conditions, Rob, and were they the same as far as everything else was high too, not just the agriculture challenges that were going on in the 80s? Were there gasoline challenges like we have today, food prices, things like that too?
Yeah, I think we had inflation in a lot of the economy. We didn't have inflation in commodity prices. That's the thing that didn't work very well for farmers. And what was ultra-high land prices, and people begin to borrow against those land values with equity, and then they begin to crash, and that's what put a lot of folks in jeopardy, that they had borrowed against their equity, and now their equity had disappeared. So
Chris, when he's talking about land prices, how do the land prices right now compare, considering we're hearing farmland being bought anywhere from $18,000 to $20,000 an acre? And you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the latest auctions. How does that fare in an economy like this?
Yeah, I think it was been about 3 months ago, Rob shared the $20,000 acre club email about some five or six sales in Illinois that were over 20,000. And we just hit that for the first time in Warren County last Friday. So we had a farm sale for $20,750, I believe. So yeah, that's really that's another whole other thing that we could talk a lot about that. But I would like to comment though too that and not just the rise. We've got a rise in valuations that are propping up farmers' balance sheets. But leaving that aside, I think we are the balance sheets of the farmers that we deal with are probably as healthy as they've been in a long time, and I'm talking about mainly liquidity. So liquidity is a big factor, and we're seeing still a lot of very good liquidity in the ag sector. I mean, our ag deposits have really held up very well, and we're seeing less borrowing on operating lines even with the higher input costs now. We all expect this to change as we're talking about the input costs. As we roll into 2023, we're expecting changes not only in the inputs but in the land. You got 20,000 acre land. What kind of cash rent does that equate to, right? So are we going to see $500 an acre cash rents become normal? I don't know. So that's the scary part, I think, that Ron's alluding to. It's just the volatility and the risk is way up. But I know that we run, and I mentioned this at prior roundtables, but we run a program called GrainBridge, and I just pulled off the global metrics just this morning, and the average break-even price for our producers is $11.07 on soybeans and $4.36 on corn. So overall, we're seeing, on this particular crop, we're still seeing some really good margins, but obviously that, as we spoke to, it looks different going into 2023, so we will see.
State Representative Norine Hammond, your thoughts so far?
Vanessa, a couple of things, and first going back to Chris talking about supply chain, and I had an opportunity a couple weeks ago to tour the harvester plant, John Deere harvester plant up in East Moline, and yes, they have equipment that is sitting out there. It's ready. Interestingly, what a lot of it is waiting on is tires. And it isn't so much the chip. We've kind of gone on past the chip, but now it's tires are a big issue.
Everybody's putting in turf fields,
and it's that I think is concerning, certainly. And when you look at this equipment that is out there, that is available, and it is absolutely incredible. But then you look at the price tag of it, and it has to make you, as a producer, stop and think, in an industry where we don't have a lot of young people coming into the industry, is that something that I want to do, that I can afford to do, that I don't have family coming into the operation? Can I afford that equipment? And I think people are stopping and thinking twice about a lot of that. And yet, in order to produce the way we are able to produce now, you have to have those improvements, and I think that's incredibly important. And going back to what Ken said, part of the problem that we have, certainly in the state of Illinois, we're fortunate to have folks like Neil with a farm background in the Senate on the Ag Committee, and Dan certainly in the House. But both at the federal level and the state level, we don't have anywhere near the number of individuals in the legislatures, in Congress, that understand agriculture and understand what people are going through. And so it puts a burden. Fortunately, we have people like Lauren, but it puts that burden on the farm bureaus, the Soybean Association, the corn marketing. So that's where the voices are for a lot of our legislation.
Yeah, thank goodness we have Lauren, who is on deck here in just a second. Senator Neil Anderson, let's draw you in, sir. You've heard a lot of the discussion so far, and Representative Hammond pointed out about the young people. Gosh, I couldn't imagine going and trying to bid on a farm that I would like to add to, as you typically add X amount of acres to your property, but $20,750 for someone to get started, that's pretty daunting.
Yeah, it is a daunting task, and especially here in Illinois, where we continue to, as government, we continue to come down hard on farmers and business owners and make it harder and harder. I mean, all the things we've discussed today we could be here for days unpacking all the things that have been discussed, but the overarching 30,000-foot view, and I'm of course oversimplifying it, but I mean, from things like the interest rates to supply chain problems to cost and inflation. Again, oversimplifying, but all these things are caused by bad government. And then we come into a thing, as Lauren mentioned, with a multi-billion-dollar subsidy being talked about for fertilizer because of a problem government created. Now government is trying to dig its way out. And there has to be a time where we have to have an honest conversation of when are we going to start backing away from government intervention and letting farmers and business owners do the right thing and let them control it? Or are we going to keep going down the road of crony capitalism with government intervention and massive inflation and trying to bail out problems of government over and over? And the one thing I think that hasn't been mentioned here today that is another issue is workforce. We can't find people to work, and I don't know if that's a cultural issue. I think a lot of it has to do, again, with government intervention. I mean, we're giving money out hand over fist to people to simply stay home. We saw it start during COVID, and it hasn't stopped. And I think that has a lot to do with it too. But I know any one of these guys here that are farmers are having trouble finding good people to hire. You go to any union shovel group shop, they can't find people to work. And again, this is a rabbit hole, and we could talk about it for days and days. But we've taught our young people that the only way you're going to be successful in life is if you get a 4-year liberal arts degree, and it's nonsense. We need to start teaching our young kids that aren't meant for college or don't want to go to college. You can go out right now and work for $150 or work for laborers or work for a farm and make a good living, and you don't have college debt. But we've taught our young kids that the completely wrong thing.
Dwayne Bonifer, before we jump into the the Farm Bill, I'll give you a chance to address that. Coming from Monmouth College, you guys are seeing some shifts in liberal arts education and looking at agriculture as an important part of the future for the students that you have.
Yeah, I think that any liberal arts college that's worth its weight in salt has to be focused on the career markets, has to be focused on what do students and what do families want, what are they willing to pay for, what are they interested in doing beyond college? And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it has to be a relevant education. It has to be one that prepares students for a career in their regions. Higher education has to do a much better job than it has in listening to what our customers, their high-cost students' customers and their families are interested in. And if we don't do that, then we can't be part of the solution.
Okay, DeLoss, you please start with Lauren Lurkins with the Illinois Farm Bureau. Let's start talking about the Farm Bill.
I'm really intrigued about how this is going to go. So it'll be a 23 Farm Bill. The 96 Farm Bill was supposed to be the 94 Farm Bill. The 2014 Farm Bill was supposed to be the 2012 Farm Bill. And, a lot of this could just be based upon who will be writing or which party will be writing the Farm Bill. Lauren, when you think about, crop insurance certainly comes to mind, but what are a couple of things that are a little more in your purview?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of builds off of what Ken was talking about before, and I mentioned this a little bit in the presentation this morning. I obviously work in the environment, the conservation world, which is always a huge part of a Farm Bill negotiation, in addition to nutrition and Title I. But that dynamic of that negotiation has changed with the announcement of the Inflation Reduction Act. So the $90 billion that Ken talked about, 19.5 of that billion dollars has gone through NRCS, which is a part of the USDA. And interestingly enough, the conversation was around climate and conservation, but the press release out of NRCS had everything to do with nitrogen and nitrogen management. So that's interesting to me in the work that I do, both for water quality and conservation. But I think, I have some meetings set even before the end of this month to learn more from NRCS what that actually means today out of that 19.5 billion. So regardless, I think the agencies the USDA itself is working on figuring out how that is going to look immediately. And then we all are figuring out what that's going to look like for negotiation. So in theory, you've got environment and conservation stakeholders that have quite a bit of what they usually come to the table asking for.
That was one of the questions, and Illinois Farm Bureau opposed the Inflation Reduction Act, and part of the question was, so are we going to fund these things that are Farm Bill funding, or are we going to fund them somewhere else, or is there more money coming, or how does all of that work? It's interesting to see how that develops.
All good questions.
Yeah. At the Farm Progress Show last week, there was a panel. There were 6 legislators, including Minority Leader G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania. There were 3 from Iowa. Representative Davis was there. There was a representative from Missouri, and then Representative Thompson, who said, if the Republicans are writing the Farm Bill, it will not be a climate bill. I'd be curious, from our elected officials, when you say something like that, it doesn't mean you're anti-climate, but just how that sort of thing is perceived and how you weave things now in throughout legislative and through writing bills like that.
And DeLoss, I think one of the participants was Senator Annette Sweeney from Iowa. She is the first vice president on the State Ag and Rural Leaders Group, and I can hear that coming from Annette. And you're absolutely right. It isn't that we are going to ignore climate issues. The focus needs to be on agriculture and agribusiness. First of all, it is such a small part of the Farm Bill to begin with, which is by design. But if we start incorporating and making the climate issue the number one part of what is to be the Farm Bill, we'll never get the Farm Bill done. And we'll be going back to 2014, and let's just rewrite what we had then. So it isn't that these legislators want to ignore climate issues. These producers deal with climate issues all day, every day. And fortunately, we have people like Brendan and his industry that is doing the research to try to combat not having enough rain, having too much rain, whatever it might be. So I think that they are good stewards of their land, and they want to do the very best they can dealing with the climate issues, but they don't want to make it the focus of the Farm Bill.
Crop insurance will certainly be a key part of it, and I feel like a lot of the, I'm in fact talking to Representative Bustos at the State Fair. They had a listening session at the State Fair also in the Department of Ag building, and she said the message has been heard pretty clear of don't mess with crop insurance, essentially. Does that sound like around the room, from our farmers, that seemed like one of the things that we've had, like in 2012 when we had the drought, we didn't have to come asking for more money because we had a good crop insurance program in place. I think one of the questions, though, will be just how much is crop insurance going to cost, going back to $6 corn, but having it in place would be vitally important.
I know times have changed, but I think one of the dangerous things out there is the press, which beyond the farm press is usually as uninformed as any first grader, but they talk about, will the Republicans write the Farm Bill or will the Democrats write the Farm Bill? I remember when I was in Washington, a speechwriter for Secretary of Agriculture Butts, and it was in the midst of negotiations for a farm bill, and they finally got to the point where they're going to announce the details. And I happened to luckily been riding with the Secretary up to Capitol Hill. That was back when they had bag phones instead of these devices, and I remember that Butts got on the phone and called the chief negotiator in the U.S. Senate on the Democrat side so that he could be present for the announcement, and so that maybe things tilted a little way toward what Butts wanted. But the point was, they all agreed they needed to come together and make it a farm bill that wasn't Republican or Democrat. And I wish, and I hope we can get back to that, or we may find that things that we all think are important to be in a farm bill may not be there because of some dumb deal or something else that's made. So I think that's a great concern for the year ahead.
Representative Swanson?
Yeah, I agree with Ken. It needs to be a bill we can all agree on. And, there is some discussion of separating out the food program from the farm bill. And as that raises its head every time we talk about farm bill. And that would water down the bill even more and should remain a part of the bill. As far as the insurance, it's been the life raft for many farmers through the years. Right now in our areas, we've got great looking crops. My son up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, who was agronomist for a seed company up there, they're harvesting 20 bushel corn. And many farmers can't survive on 20 bushel corn. The dairy farmers are paying $100 an acre to come harvest that corn just to put in their silos to feed their livestock. So there needs to be some type of a net there of protections.
Yeah, you're right. I was talking with an Illinois Corn Board member, Terry West, Rob, or Terry Smith rather, and he had to utilize crop insurance in 2012 when the drought was occurring, and he said, it's not like anybody wants to use this. It's like if your house catches on fire, you just need it to sustain. Nobody ever said, hey, glad my house burned down, I got a bigger house. It doesn't work that way. It's about sustaining. What do you see from the Illinois Corn Marketing Board for our growers? What's the most important thing for the Farm Bill?
Well, I think has already been mentioned that crop insurance is the one constant that has worked, and you've avoided all the ad hoc disaster stuff that wound up costing more, and you probably helped people less when it went down those routes. So crop insurance is the big one, and I think over time it's tended to be a collaborative effort in the past between parties, and based on the having the SNAP or food assistance part of it, that was the part they kind of rallied around, and everything else kind of fell into place based on that being part of it. So let's hope that continues to, and it does not become a climate-dominated kind of discussion, or we probably are in trouble. So,
Lauren Lurkins.
I was going to ask, does carbon come up in any of this, do you think, in next year?
DeLoss makes me nervous with his additional questions. So on the point of a climate carbon bill, I almost start to use them synonymously now, even though that's not true because the verbiage gets a little confused. But, you know, I work on, as we talked about this morning, a number of environmental issues, and the USDA NRCS conservation programs, which are voluntary, incentive-based, they're an answer for a lot of on-farm conservation. They started because of the Dust Bowl and soil conservation. We've got aspects that are water quality improvements. Obviously, there's some climate aspects and some carbon sequestration, but the data on just what you can do on the farm and how much you can sequester in the soil carbon is we still have a lot to learn as a country and really globally. So I think it's not even doing service to the programs themselves just to call them climate, because they are beneficial for a lot of other reasons. The other point I would make is that, you know, the demand on these programs here in the state of Illinois is real, and we do have a lot of farmers that do utilize these USDA programs for what they are today, for the resource concerns that they have. It doesn't make it easy to follow the rules and get the money, but there is demand for the programs in Illinois largely.
Brendan, does your company, are they talking carbon sequestration as you think about your customers? Because everything seems to be about climate and carbon, just like Lauren said.
We've had discussions in the past, and Growmark has people on staff that have looked into this. They've done a lot of research on various programs. Ron and I have had many conversations about carbon and what to do. It's still kind of what I'm dealing with the people. There's a lot of questions that haven't been answered, because every year it seems like you have to do one more thing in order to get one more level. And then it also comes to, and which, to quote Ron, is that, say if you have you got a field that you put all the cover crops and things in, or if you need to do some tillage because of a big rain event or something to fill in areas, what happens? You know, if you've sold carbons there, credits on that, are they going to allow you to do that? There's a lot of things, and those have probably been answered by now, but to be honest with you, the people that I had looking into it are kind of shying away just to see what's going to really come to fruition with it.
Can you answer that at all, Lauren?
I have a lot of questions about carbon markets, and in fact, I have an hour-and-a-half presentation on the issues. I obviously look at it as a recovering attorney, but those contracts that a farmer is required to sign are very onerous for a farmer to actually meet the demands, and they are long-term commitments with, and sometimes brand new companies or brand new aspects of a company. So I believe that the demand for soil carbon is legitimate. I think that our companies across our country are interested in documenting their carbon footprint and decreasing that. But I think it's very positive that farmers and agriculture could be a solution for them and for ourselves. But I think the details have yet to be worked out. So right now, I believe that farmers are sitting on quite a bit of leverage if they have the know-how, the interest, and the equipment to do a lot of these practices. I think they deserve a little bit more money per acre.
So you were asking about farm bills. That's something that comes from Congress, but then Lauren today in her address, the other part that comes from D.C. would be from the bureaucracy, for example, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and atrazine, and the importance not just of I talked to Brian Duncan about this, our vice president, who has spoken at the event and has been on this roundtable, of not just messing with atrazine, but just coming up with some random number of what should be the parts per billion. So you got a couple of things at risk here that's just could be an absolute game changer for not just Illinois farmers, but farmers all over.
David Zimmerman, talking about this carbon sequestration, how does this affect your company?
Well, carbon and carbon sequestration, you cannot go to a conference involving any type of fuel ethanol. That is the topic of discussion. that is what's coming down the pike for us, and many of you have probably seen that Big River has signed a letter of intent to sign on to one of the carbon pipelines crossing Iowa. In the years 24, 25, and 26 is when we expect completion. What's the driver of this? Now, you could say it's legislating action through the tax code. For me, the driver is economics. We have electric vehicles that seem to be very popular right now. We all know there are certain problems, there are certain sizable problems with electric vehicles and their ability to penetrate the transportation pool. We are tasked with being green. If we want to continue to be relevant, we have been tasked with being green, and that means reducing our carbon index score. I don't have a political dog in this fight, except that of my shareholders. And at this point in time, if we want to maintain viable corn markets in Galva, Illinois, in Monmouth, Illinois, in West Burlington, Illinois, excuse me, we have to look into this, and we have to try and remain competitive and support the value of our assets into the future.
Okay. And real quick, Chris Gavin and Senator Neil Anderson, you'll be on deck to close us out for the first hour. Chris, you had mentioned ESG at our last, is that right? Yes. ESG at our last roundtable?
Yes. Environmental, social, and governance. And it's the banks, because of they're heavily regulated, and we have FDIC insurance that we get from the federal government. So because of that, we deal with the regulation. So this is the latest thing. We actually have an exam coming up later this fall, so we're going to get to see if this comes up much. But I can see it's going to, and it's so on the environmental side. I think they're going to task banks to have programs to encourage climate-friendly practices, and so I could see the day where there's some discount or there's some restrictions possibly on how and who we lend money to, based on what their environmental practices might be. I mean, we've been warned that it's coming to the banks, and I think we've talked a lot about the social side of it. Has been a big part of what they might come forward with at first, but
the social side, did you say?
Yeah, the social side, more of basically our hiring practices and diversity and those kind of things, which we were all working on. But yeah, so I think that's the path that we seem to be on. And again, I think a lot of this is going to the outcome of this is going to be dependent upon who is governing our country and down the road here. So.
And Senator Anderson?
I think I'll just continue to what my first statement was and play off what Mr. Zimmerman said. Again, we have government telling us how we have to do things, and there's unintended consequences with that, and we're seeing it in California. You have to have an electric car. They're not going to allow any ICE vehicles by 2035, but now you can't charge your car because we're having energy problems. So again, this is the unintended consequence of too much government intervention.
Well, you took us to where we're going to be starting when we come back from break. We will be talking about the Next Generation Fuels Act legislation that could be helpful with ethanol, of course, and carbon and the engines themselves, plus the federal and state policies impacting agriculture, which include the future of electric. We have 17 states looking at that same discussion that was going on in California. So we've got a lot to talk about in the second hour. So DeLoss, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll get right back into the Ag Roundtable. How's that sound?
That sounds good. What about, would you say something about cheesecake?
That's in an hour.
Okay. All right,
buddy, and we'll get that cheesecake. All right. 10:59, you're listening to WRAM Monmouth, Illinois. We'll be back with the Ag Roundtable. Director with Illinois Farm Bureau. How does this bill satisfy the climate carbon folks that you talk with and learn from about policy, and what is it missing? Why was it hot when it came out the gate, so to speak, with Senate and the House? and as Rob said, now it's slim.
Well, I would say Rob's probably a better expert than I am on this, but we were having a conversation over here over the break about just the relevancy of ethanol and otherwise in the future. Just thinking about ways for the CI scores, those carbon intensity scores, to come down, and it's doable, and it is the future. So I think from a Farm Bureau standpoint, it's interesting to see different approaches for ethanol to be relevant into the future.
Ask Ron Moore too with American Soybean Association. Does it include biodiesel? Is that part of the equation too?
Well, it's always been a part of the equation for reducing our emissions with biodiesel. And now you've got a new product called renewable diesel that's kind of the next generation of biodiesel. There's a lot of opportunities. One of the biggest questions we have, if the demand for the renewable diesel comes to fruition of what everybody thinks, what are we going to do with all the additional soybean meal that's going to be crushed? We crush soybeans predominantly to get the meal for livestock food, and then the oil is used for a variety of other things. If we're going to demand more renewable diesel made from soybean oil, what are we going to do with the rest of the meal? So we're trying to export that meal otherwise, and also ramp up livestock production so we can export a value-added product from the United States into other countries that need our protein, our animal protein. So a lot of unanswered questions, but a lot of opportunity to add to the value of the products that we grow here in the United States.
It's quite a 180 though. It was all about soybean meal. What are we going to do with we got this huge pile of soybean oil? What are we going to do with it? And now, we talked before about farmers being an answer, a solution toward climate as opposed to part of the problem, and soybean oil certainly. We can
reduce our emissions immediately with using ethanol and biodiesel and a lot of wonderful things that, back in the day when they said that soybean cooking oil was bad for you, then all that billions of pounds of soybean oil went on the market that nobody was wanting to buy, so then they developed this biodiesel. So, the research that's been done through contributions in the corn checkoff and the soybean checkoff has been beneficial. You just don't really hear too much about the advantages of being involved in those kind of programs.
David Zimmerman gave a presentation to us at Rotary Club not too long ago about the electrification of vehicles. You were, of course, speaking on behalf of the ethanol industry. How do you guys view this as an upcoming, I want to say challenge, but it's really creeping up faster than we had anticipated through legislation?
Well, with regard to the Next Generation Fuels Act, we love this bill. It's bipartisan, first and foremost. I know it's getting hung up to one degree or another, I believe, in the Senate. It's bipartisan, and why is it important? The U.S. farmer does a very good job of growing corn. If you look, the yields go up 1.7, trendline yields, 1.7 to 2 bushels per acre every year, and that's through the help of folks like Brendan and equipment manufacturers and new technologies. But you can see a day 15 years down the road when we have 200 bushel corn yields as a national average. Now, we're pretty comfortable on our corn usage today, but as ethanol producers, we want more of that tank. These aromatics are low-hanging fruit. They need to go. They're carcinogens. They contribute 90% of the particulate matter that comes out of that tailpipe. They're not good products, and ethanol could replace those in an instant, and also lower the carbon index of transportation fuels. So to me, it's a no-brainer, and I know that the EPA is currently looking at the particulate matter of tailpipe emissions. So with regard to this Next Generation Fuels bill, I feel like we are starting to get a little more leverage on that front. Now, obviously, we've had pushback from some of the larger oil companies who for whatever reason, have not wanted to let our inclusion rates creep up in the tank. But I really do hope to see this get on the Senate floor at some point, because it's a good bill. Illinois corn growers, National Corn Growers, Growth Energy, Renewable Fuels Association, we all support it.
Dan Swanson, you guys have been, you and Senator Anderson and Representative Hammond are well aware of the legislation going on from Springfield. Remind us again what we are to expect and where are we at? We have not passed any legislation on combustible engines by 2030, but we have passed some legislation for 2035 for fossil fuels.
Right. The legislation that was passed, gosh, what, a year ago now, would close down the most coal plants by 2035, possibly extended to 2040, which is going to cause a major interruption in our electrical supply, as we see now already. Coal plant operators are reluctant to spend any money on their plants because the return on investment is beyond, some cases, at 2040. So why spend millions of dollars today for something I can never recoup? The fossil fuels projected to shut off, including natural gas and fossil fuels, the year 2050. It's ways down the road, but when we look at the electrification of our automobiles across Illinois, and we look here in the city of Monmouth, population, about 9,000 people, and we look at the households of about 3,500 households, and each one of those households has 2 cars per family, a little over 6,800, about 7,000 cars. We're here in California that are shutting down and not allowing people to charge their vehicles. So do we have the capacity here in Monmouth to charge 7,000 cars a night? I doubt the grids can support that today. So we've got a lot to do before we can go to a full, in my opinion, before we can go to a full fleet of electric cars across Illinois. And when we talk about the Next Generation Fuel Act, that just makes it even more sensible. We've got to include our natural resources, our renewable energies within the equation somewhere. And to just put these dates out on a wall of 2035, 2040, or 2050, that's just, we aren't there yet to be able to do that. And we talk about the green energy and how it's going to affect farmers. And today, I as a farmer myself, I'm concerned, what are the tools going to be available for me to plant my crop by 2035, 2040, 2050? We see a lot of electric cars. There's been some experimentation with electric tractors, but we don't have I don't believe the capacity's built yet, so I can stay in my field a 12 or 14 hour day with one battery charge. And that's a concern. We see farmers that operate round the clock, combines, planters, whatever the case may be. We don't have the technology yet to keep them in the field the hours they need to be.
Or the elevators.
Or the elevators, or anything that supports the ag industry. So, yeah, it is a big concern.
From an economics perspective, Ken McMillan, I've also, now that we have people that we know who are buying electric vehicles, a tail light, for example, costs $1,000 to repair. And I saw a quote from a dealer for a friend of mine down south. The new battery for a hybrid car is $29,000 to replace. So now you're looking at an economic impact, not only just to farmers, but what consumer has an additional $30,000 to replace a battery for one of these doohickeys, or not doohickeys, but you know what I mean, these vehicles.
Well, it's another good example of when public, meaning government, decisions about what they're either going to require or give financial incentives to happen, and then they're supposed to be implemented overnight. When markets make those decisions, usually there is, as there's increasing potential for electric vehicles, there is another industry that produces batteries, and they're sensing that, and they want to make a profit, and they're working in that direction, and so forth. What's really difficult is when all of a sudden we've got a grand scheme, and the markets have not sent the economic signals to the various players to be ready. to have the resources, to have the research, and so forth. And I think that's a part of why agriculture is going to face constant challenges, and why the rest of industry does. It also leads to another point that I just had a thought. We talk about all kinds of things in the Farm Bill. We forget that there is a research component with that Farm Bill. And we forget that the funding that the research agencies of USDA do can deal with a lot of these things. And the land-grant college system is set up, and a lot of the things that we benefit from today come from the research that's done at the land-grant colleges, sometimes in cooperation with various companies. Like at Illinois, the Agricultural Engineering Department, the things they might have done with Deere and Company are important. But research today is especially dealing with the environmental stuff. There is technology out there way beyond our reach financially, which can send almost a robotic piece of machinery through the field with the kind of, I would call it an electric eye, that can spot a weed and diagnose what the weed is and shoot the right chemical to deal with it, which will minimize so many environmental problems. But if we don't keep on the cutting edge of doing this kind of research,
right,
we're not going to have some of the answers that Dan said he needs.
Ron, do you have a pack of robots yet on your property?
No, but there are those out in the commercial right now. I've seen one in Australia that they had the electric eyes that would identify the weed and only spray that weed and not any place else. And so the farmers that were using it were saving 90% of their herbicide costs on it. So that technology is available right now.
Sorry, I just wanted to back up just a little bit. I almost think there could be a real safety concern. If you just think of all those extension cords here on the square, just go in every different direction, you're going to trip over as you walk. It's
during a flood.
Yeah, there you go again.
Real quick, Dwayne Bonifer with us from the college, but you're also from Kentucky, and you kind of have an understanding of the coal. It started really in that area, the closing of coal mines as the beginning of fossil fuel changes. How did that impact the economy down there?
Oh, well, I'd invite anyone to go to Hazard, Kentucky, and take a tour through Perry County to see what the impact is. Of course, some of the job losses through mechanization. I mean, what used to take 50 individuals to mine coal can now be done with about 2 or 3. And so there's improvements in technology. It's not only requires fewer people to do it, but it's safer. You rarely hear about mine collapses anymore because there's a lot more safety and there's a lot more machines that do the work. But if you want to see the impact of what's happened to the coal industry, I'd start in Hazard, Kentucky, and Perry County, and look there. Maybe go to Prestonsburg, where Dwight Yoakam's from, and check out that area. Whitesburg's not a bad place to go either. I mean, in these towns, that region of the country has been absolutely decimated. I read the other day that Knott County, Kentucky is looking at about a 43% population loss over the next 10 to 12 years right now. And Senator Brandon Smith, I was just happened to be on his page reading his work that he does. He's out of Hazard, Kentucky, and he talks about what are we going to do for the communities. When you lose 43%, you lose 23% of your population, you're not only dealing with a brain drain, but you're dealing with a labor shortage as well. So how are you even going to pay the bills to keep the lights on in your cities and counties?
Senator Neil Anderson, farmers are supportive of electric. It's just they want to have options. The industry needs some options. What's the right way to do this? And Lauren Lurkins, you'll be on deck for that. What's the right way to do it? You as a senator probably try very hard to do that in Springfield, but something's catapulting this technology, this agenda to another level rather quickly.
Yeah, well, I think the right way to do it is make the product good enough so people choose it. Kind of what Ken was saying. I mean, when we force people to do things, number one, they rebel because they don't want to do it, and number two, it's more of government telling you have to do this. And I sit on the Energy Committee in Springfield, and going back to what Representative Swanson was talking about this bill and what our requirements are, we just don't have the technology in wind and solar right now to put in enough power to the grid to sustain everything that we want to do. And we've been supplementing wind and solar from a government level for decades, saying, this is the future, we just need to give it a little bump. Well, we're still doing it. And until somebody makes something like the weed identifying sprayer that people want to buy because it's cost savings, and in turn, it's also good for the environment, and here you did that all without government telling you had to do it. Because the free market dictated that I made something that saves the farmer money, and then in turn it also puts less chemical on the field, and then the environment wins. So where do we go from here? That's a good question.
Lauren Lurkins, Environmental Policy Director.
Right. Well, I have a lot of thoughts around this issue. I grew up in Marion in southern Illinois, and I have family and friends that are no longer coal miners, but absolutely were. And there's a lot of similar stories, I would say, in my hometown because of that. So personally, I agree with Neil quite a bit on forcing people to do things that might just be my personality, but it's also a lot of the folks that I work for and with, that if you're given an ultimatum or a deadline, it causes some rushed ideas, some maybe half thought through solutions, and just to kind of get to that deadline. So I think it can lead to that rebellion that Neil talked about, as well as just some not great solutions where if people were brought together and given some time, they could come up with some better solutions. I'm just going to agree with everything that Ken keeps saying as well, because he's absolutely right. I actually spent 2 days of this week before coming here on the campus of the University of Illinois. The first day was with researchers focused on climate science, wanting to hear the different perspectives and then come up with tools to help farmers adapt and potentially help mitigate our climate change challenges. And the second day, and that actually I'm missing the second part of this second one, is all about solar panels. And so to the point of sort of rush legislation, now we're dealing with prime farmland coming out and being put into solar panels, where you have multiple universities across our country, in fact, collaborating on campus at the University of Illinois, talking about, well, what if we found a great solution where we could have solar panels and also agriculture, agrovoltaics is how you say the term, with farms in Arizona, Colorado, and Illinois. So obviously the crops are very different, the climates are very different, and guess what? They have a lot of really cool, promising opportunities ahead of them, but they're worried that these deadlines that are made up by state and federal governments are just going to push through their opportunity to have a scientific solution that is good for farmers and for solar developers and for us all to meet these climate goals. So we're missing a lot of really great solutions and conversation and science and research because we're just rushing through it to say, maybe to put out a press release to say we did it.
Is it conceivable then that this fight for sustainability and the rush for sustainability is eventually unsustainable? We talk about environmental sustainability and we all go broke trying to be sustainable. We're not sustainable anymore.
Well, I think this is how I personally feel. This is not a Farm Bureau statement, but as a person who does environmental on the defense side of environment, I feel like it's always a very easy thing to say, I'm pro-environment, like just stop that, ban that. I think it's a much harder and a larger challenge to come up with a solution that allows people to coexist. So that's what I would just challenge people to maybe give it some time and put some effort in.
Coexist, what a great word. What a concept. Senator Neil Anderson.
Well, and Lauren, if I could, doing what you do, could you tell me what the sustainability and the impact on the environment is to these lithium strip mines that we're getting all this stuff from? I mean, that's just another example of what we don't talk about when we're forcing everybody to look at the shiny new, electric car, which nobody's ever driven one. They're fun, I'll admit. Yeah. But nobody wants to talk about the environmental impact of these lithium strip mines that we're doing and the impact that has on the environment.
Right. I think, everything that we want in modern society has trade-offs. Nobody ever really wants to talk about a trade-off. A consumer, a politician, no offense, you don't really want to hear about what you're giving up for this certain thing, but they're in everything we do as a society.
And where are the strip mines located? China.
Is that predominantly where they're located? I thought somewhere in Australia.
There are some in Australia. China predominantly controls either the mining or the processing. A lot of those rare earth metals have to be further processed before they can be utilized in computer chips and things of that nature. So I think there's a serious unintended consequence if we were to see widespread electrification or penetration of EVs in the future. Now, even if you look at the government's own statistics on how many electric vehicles are actually going to be sold by the year 2050, they still have 80% of the transportation vehicles as liquid fuel, that being gasoline, diesel fuel, ethanol. So even their own projections, they do have some realism in those. But that is my major concern is obviously our relationship with China is a little rocky at this point in time, and I don't know that it's getting better in the near future. So putting them as the master of our transportation in the future, I think is hugely important.
State Representative Norine Hammond.
So it's interesting, Vanessa, when we're having these discussions, and for years Germany has put itself out as being the end-all be-all for renewables, and now all of a sudden we're hearing that they're having to rethink what they've done with their nuke plants, and now they're looking to open them back up again because they don't have the energy that they need. And so I think we're beginning to see the consequences of these artificial dates, and they are totally artificial. These dates that we put in, and certainly we did it in Illinois. We put dates in legislation, and I had a conversation with one of my colleagues from Chicago at the time, and she said to me, "You just have to get your colleagues on board with this bill." And she said, solar panels and wind turbines, they're the future. And I said, well, if they're the future, then how about putting them in your backyard? Oh no, I can't do that. But you have all of this area in downstate Illinois where you can do this. Well, it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, but it's not the answer. And now we're hearing a push to put wind turbines in Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
And I mean, the whole thing is just absolutely absurd. And as Ken has said so many times, we need to get the public out of it, get the people that understand the industry, understand the needs, and get them to the table having the discussions, and not the politicians.
Ron Moore, you're on deck, because I remember something you said to me a couple Ag Roundtables ago. Senator Anderson, who's making the money? Because when you look at the fact that electricity, the electric vehicle push right now, I look at 20 years of driving from here home to Arkansas and back, and all I see is timber being cut down, concrete going up with shopping malls, new housing condominiums. That has to have an impact, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, on the climate too, when it comes to water quality, water in general. And I'm no scientist or any of that, but somebody somehow is lobbying, or there has to be part of it going on.
You mean lobbying for the electric car industry?
How does this work? How does something grow so fast?
Well, I think the only way something can move this fast is when government requires it, right? Which is what we're seeing in California. We're starting to see it here. We're starting to see it across the nation. It's this push to require, to mandate things. And as I said before, the best way to do it is let the John Deeres of the world and the Chevrolet and Ford, let them develop something that is worth buying, that people will buy without being forced, and then we can all be better off. I mean, like I said, I've driven an electric car and they're fun, right? But that's fun isn't enough, and especially when it comes to agriculture. I mean, there may be a future where you get grain out of the ground with, fairy dust and unicorn piss, but right now it's diesel. Diesel is the most efficient way to get it out of the ground.
Mike, can you edit that?
I'm going from here to Kansas City.
Yeah.
I stop at a convenience store, I'm in and out in 5 minutes, and I'm on my way. What if I get there, okay, and they keep knocking down, it's only going to take you 20 minutes. Well, what if someone just got there right before I pulled in? I got to wait for his 20 minutes, and then I got to take my 20 minutes. What am I going to do for 40 minutes?
Find some cheesecake.
Well, I hope so. The Secretary of Transportation is from South Bend. Didn't he have to drive to Chicago or Indianapolis and figure this sort of thing out? And that for me, it's one of the frustrations that, Secretary of Vilsack comes, wherever he goes, he talks about biofuels. And you go to a different building in Washington, and all they talk about is electric is the future. So I don't see how. My fear is not. And I tried to ask him at Commodity Classic, he wouldn't take my question. But do those things get outside of the Department of Agriculture?
And you're assuming that's the best case scenario, right? That's if we have the base load power to supply it.
Right.
But at the same time, almost, it's a bit ironic in California. On Tuesday, we say no more internal combustion engines by a date certain in the future. And on Thursday, we say turn your thermostat to 78. You can't charge your electric vehicle. And we'll go through a scheduled series of brownouts, blackouts, or whatever the outs are, so.
And in Denver, people that tried to turn if they had a certain solar contract, when they tried to turn their thermostat down, they were not allowed to.
Oh, did not know that.
It could not go south of 78. It's probably something in the fine print, but they couldn't go lower than 78.
Dwayne's chomping at the bit.
Vanessa, I'll send you the link to this after the show. There was a really interesting story earlier this summer in the Wall Street Journal about a reporter and her friend drove from Chicago to New Orleans with an electric car and back. And she writes about the travails of trying to find a place to charge, how much time it took. Went into a Mercedes dealership because it was supposed to be a place where they could charge the vehicle, and the dealership had no idea that they were even one of the places where you could charge an electric vehicle. At the end of the day, she said, we've got a long way to go before we're even close to being ready. But it's an interesting story because it's a first-person account of what they went through driving from Chicago to New Orleans and back, and they put a time limit on it as well.
Ron Moore.
Yeah, so all this is kind of interesting. I heard on the radio this morning that because of the rolling blackouts or brownouts in California, the people with electric vehicles are taking their gasoline generator and plugging their electric vehicles in to charge their electric vehicle batteries, which is totally contrary to what the Save the Environment folks are talking about. So there's always unintended consequences when you go government mandates stuff, and so it's comical. You couldn't write this stuff up, as silly as it is.
Dan?
No, you can. And as I mentioned about the coal mine down near St. Louis, my seatmate Charlie Meyer spoke very eloquently in opposition to it, and he threw some numbers out there. And one of the numbers that really sticks in my head, to equal the amount of energy that plant put out would take 120 to 140,000 acres of solar panels to provide that same amount of energy. Keep in mind, those panels are only going to see daylight when the sun's shining and provide energy, but that's a lot of ground out of production. And to Ken's comments and everyone else's comments, the technology's not there yet. And will it be there in the 15 years we need it by? It's going to be a lot of smart people sitting around the table to figure this out. But I think we've got a ways to go before we're at that point.
And Ken, again, from an economics perspective, this creates a whole new market for a whole new set of vehicles to be on the streets by 2030. And we have all sorts of reasons why climate, there's more to it. There's plastic bags, there's recycling, there's, like we said, concrete. There's so many elements to the environment, not just one with the electricity, but it's creating a whole new market. That just seems like that's forcing things, like Senator Anderson and I were discussing.
Well, and part of the question is, if it comes from a decision made today that we're going to do something tomorrow, there hasn't been enough of an economic signal out there for the industries to develop that can really do it. I mean, we forget that people respond to economic incentives because they need to make a profit, and their banker needs to have some assurance that they know what they're doing and that the risk isn't so great. So I just like to, DeLoss said sustainability is out the window. I think we need to understand sustainability has become a nice term for a lot of people to talk that don't have any idea what they're talking about. We just heard about $20,700 an acre. Now, if somebody buys that, they're going to have to work like heck to make a living on that. And some people would say, oh, they're going to do all these things that won't be sustainable. Well, yeah, they're going to try to make a profit, but the last thing they want to do is to do anything to that acre that is going to make it less productive. I mean, the market provides more incentive for sustainability than all these programs in the world. And farmers are the most likely to achieve sustainability because of that resource, land, that they don't want to deteriorate.
Yeah. It's interesting too, so being from around Bloomington, Rivian is in Bloomington, or maybe it's in Normal, I don't know what officially it's in Normal. Mm-hmm. It's in the area, and it is just taking people from here, there, and everywhere. For example, there is a company that makes big grain bins on the north side of Normal, and my guy Slim, after 7 months on the job, was the senior guy on his shift, and he was saying, I got an interview at Rivian on Tuesday. And so you have all of these other ag-related or manufacturing-related people that are looking over here, and what does that mean for other businesses? What do they have to do to compete? What does that do for wages? What does that do for so many other things of just being able to sustain? So, in competition, it can be a friendly thing, but it really makes businesses have to put their heads together and figure out how they can compete with something that has, especially in this case, a governmental advantage.
Rapid round here, y'all. It's about 11:48. Dan, Neil, Norine, anything else from the state level that our audience should know about that could impact our communities or agriculture or agribusiness? Anything on the horizon, Senate and House?
I think what we as legislators that appreciate agriculture and agribusiness, what we always hope for is that we do nothing, and that we stay the heck out of everybody's way. Lauren referred to non-regulatory. That's the greatest word there is when it comes to agriculture and things that we can do, as Ken said, that the folks that own that ground want to do the very best to have it produce the best and take care of their families. So the best thing that we can do and we can hope for going forward is that we do nothing.
Senator Anderson?
Yeah, I mean, to end on that, I would agree. I think there's a lot of legislation coming up that we've been able to stall in the past. is probably going to come up again as it comes up every year, but hopefully we can get some of those legislators from the city of Chicago and the suburbs to understand agriculture a little more. The Farm Bureau has done a good job over the years with the Adopt a Legislator program, making them understand. Will there be stuff coming up that affects the ag industry? Of course, but we will do our best to stop it or slow it down at the least. And and as Ken said, the most conservation-minded people in the world are not bureaucrats in government. They are farmers and hunters. Those are the people that understand that they have to protect to keep producing things.
Dan?
Yeah, great comments by everyone here today. I would just say that, as I mentioned earlier this morning at breakfast, there's too many people who believe that their food comes from a grocery store, not from that producer. And we see that quite often with some of the legislation, that the second, third order effect of that legislation isn't considered, just as we saw with this environmental stuff. Just as we see with some of the legislation to ban some of the chemicals we use on our farm, as stewards of the land, we're tested, we understand how to apply these chemicals, and we're certainly not going to be the ones that want to destroy our ground. It's our investment, just as anyone invests in a car. So, yeah, it's sometimes a battle to try and understand where certain types of legislation is coming from, why this legislation is coming forward, and the number of farmers in those. I'm the only legislator that has hogs on the farm. One of only 2 or 3 that have cattle on the farm. And of course, then with that, the deduction is I'm the only farmer that has both cattle and hogs. And so I take special interest in some of this legislation we see attacking me as a hog producer, or me as a cattle producer, or me as a grain livestock farmer. So it's up to me and Charlie Meyer and the other farmers in the House, a handful of us, to keep our legislators across the aisle, and even our own party, abreast of what's going on the farm. And as Neil highlighted, the Adopt a Legislator is one of the greatest programs that we've got going, and trying to educate those in the House and the Senate of what's going on the farm.
Lauren Lurkins, we want to also thank you very much for working on behalf of farmers. You're going up against all of the people who want over-regulation or aren't thinking about the consequences, even if they are unintended, that affect our farmers and this industry. So thanks for everything that you do. What are some other topics you want to make sure our farmers just know about that you're working on to help protect their livelihood?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. It's actually a very fun job for me, and I get a lot of, it's very rewarding as well. So I would say, as far as other issues, Dan talked about our livestock community. Not only is it the siting of our facilities through the Department of Ag and the Livestock Management Facilities Act, but as they move forward to operate, they are regulated very heavily by our Illinois EPA. So we do work on those issues. We have resources to help people so that their first call doesn't have to be to an attorney, just to help them understand the law. We also work on a lot of pesticide-related issues, which have been sort of alluded to, I think, in the legislative discussion. We believe that our farmers need access to more tools, not less, particularly when we look at these climate and carbon goals that we have as a society. So unfortunately, I don't know that our agencies at the federal level are talking to each other. We're trying to have conversations to make sure that they do. So a couple products come to mind. The first right now, as I sit here today, is atrazine, in the middle of a public comment period with, as DeLoss alluded to earlier, some significant changes to the use of that product if this proposal would go through. So that is a huge issue for us. But largely, I would just like to say, for the Farm Bureau members that are listening, just to thank you for your membership and your involvement in our organization.
Okay, Lauren, thank you very much. Chris, Gavin, so you've heard a lot as a banker. What has you the most concerned, and what is promising? What's on the horizon? Anything that's going to be positive for the agribusiness industry?
Well, it's concerning that we saw our first investment, or I think of the sale, the $20,750 an acre. As I understand it, neither of the contending bidders were farmers; they were investors. And there's concern in the community where the money's coming from. There's been talk of, Bill Gates. There's been talk of China. We've heard a lot of that talk around the community, and I think up until now, most land has been selling to farmers. So this sale that we saw last week was a change in that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this winter with other farm sales. We hope that the land, is owned by local farmers. That's the ideal situation going forward. So.
Where are the investors from again, Chris? Some of these investors that have been buying up land?
I heard the investor was from California.
Yeah.
But which brings me up to the really positive thing, I think, is food security and what's gone on in Ukraine. I think it's really scared people and woke some people up about food security and water. And so we have the best soil in the world, and we have with the Great Lakes, and we have our water situation is much better than other parts of the country, obviously, and also just what's changing politically. And if we don't screw it up and do everything California's doing, we're bringing industry back here to Illinois, agriculture back to Illinois because of what other states are doing. That may change. That's a big thing. Don't let it happen. But I think we've got a lot of things that seem to be very positive towards agriculture right now. I mean, a lot of concerns on increasing risk and volatility, but at the same time, we're looking at nobody has the ability to feed the world better than we do here in Warren County.
That's so true. Chris, thank you for hosting us again. This building is absolutely beautiful, and the interior decorating, I know your wife had a lot to do with that too. Well, I know she did. I know that's not usually.
Remember, she's not speaking to me now. You know that.
Right.
Based on my China remark.
She's done a wonderful job. Thank you very much. Ron Moore, earlier Lauren referenced top concerns from a particular, I can't remember who it was, but it was input prices, input availability, governmental policy. Those were three of the top concerns percentage-wise. And of course, I guess you could say other. Which of those sticks out to you right now as you retire? Let me ask you this. What when you started with the American Soybean Association, what out of those four was your concern? And now leaving, what is your concern?
When I first started with soybeans, it was farmer profitability, because we were $6 beans and $2 corn, and it was tough. And so we've morphed into these prices that we have now and the input costs. I think one of the things that concerns me the most is, I guess, two things: input prices, and then the availability of a younger farming population to come in. I have a son who's came home to farm in 2014, and he's always wanted to buy land, but since 2014 the price of land has continually gone up, and at $20,000 plus per acre, without a lot of equity that he doesn't have, it's going to be very difficult for him to purchase land to build for his family like I've done 40 years ago. So those are the two items that concern me most at this point in time. Having said that, I don't want to do anything else but farm. I've never wanted to do anything else but farm. It's been the best thing I could have ever done for my family. There's all kinds of issues that we deal with as farmers, and I would encourage every farmer out there to get involved somehow, whether it's with Farm Bureau, soybeans, corn growers, pork producers, beef producers. You have to be involved. You have to go to Springfield. You have to go to Washington, D.C. and support those organizations that do that, because if we don't talk to our legislators, the people who want to regulate us will. And you have to give them that opportunity to understand the things that they do to us out of DC and Springfield, the effect that they have on us. And it's critically important that we stand up and speak for agriculture.
Thank you for your comments. Ron Moore with us, retiring from the American Soybean Association. Excuse me, Ken McMillan had to sneeze there at the same time. Ken, your final thoughts?
You know, I'm here representing Farm Bureau, and I would just say this. When I pay my dues, every dime of those dues came back to me just to know that Lauren Lurkins is working for us. And that's what that farm organization is all about, having representation like that, having professional people like that, and that makes me very proud.
Thank you.
I'm going to need that, if you could email that audio back to the network.
To my boss, please.
That would be great. Her boss would love that.
This will be available on YouTube.
Thank you very much.
Dwayne Bonifer, I hope you gained the knowledge you were looking for today with this group.
Absolutely. You know this, Vanessa. I started out in public relations, working in the College of Agriculture, Office of Communications at the University of Kentucky. And one of the things I've always learned is that agriculture needs to continually to tell its story, not just to one another, not just to talk to one another, but it needs to do exactly what Dan talked about, which is helping more people understand that food does not come from a grocery store. And I think, you know, the cliche in public relations these days is storytelling, but I think telling that story is vitally important because look, the size of populations in urban areas is only increasing. We know that from census data. That's fewer and fewer people who have any kind of connection to not only farms, but to rural areas as well. I mean, I'm someone that doesn't live on a farm, but I have a connection to them from where I live, and as a result of that, have a better understanding of them. The media are not going to do that storytelling for you. You know, the Gannett Corporation recently cut back a lot of reporters, and it owns a lot of newspapers in this area. You're not going to get it from the local newspapers because they're simply not covering anything, much less agriculture. So I think the industry itself has to remain creative and energetic and find ways to reach those people that it can make its allies. And to, even if they aren't working in the industry, they want to support the industry because they know how important it is, quite frankly, to national security. Food security is national security.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne Bonifer. Rob Elliott, I'd throw the same question at you that I threw at Ron as well about, was it input prices when you first started, input availability, government policy, or other, and what is it today?
Well, I'll say, Vanessa, that I think one of the key benefits or value of belonging to a commodity association or farm bureau or organizations like that is the ability to have a watchdog who's at work for you to prevent, in many cases, bad stuff from maybe happening. So Lawrence talked about glyphosate and dicamba and atrazine and all those kind of things. We've talked about the push for green climate action to happen in the marketplace. To have all those happen in a more palatable way is helped by those organizations that many of us belong to. So to me, averting negative public policy is kind of a pretty big deal, and troubling so, increasing seems like more all the time. So
thank you very much. Rob Elliott with us. David Zimmerman, I hope you've enjoyed your first time, and we put you right next to Senator Anderson, who was a first-timer. Hopefully both of y'all will enjoy coming back.
Yeah, actually, it's been wonderful. I really appreciate the invitation. I would just kind of echo Rob's comments there. Government policy, I would say, is probably my chief concern, to potentially create ripples. We're in a changing situation right now. And I would like for everyone to understand that from Big River's standpoint, the things that we are doing to adapt to this current environment and potentially the future environment are to protect agriculture. I'm the son of a farmer, the grandson of a farmer. I believe that as goes ethanol, so goes corn. And I guess I would like for everyone to understand that and keep that in mind, that we are working to maintain viable and well-supported corn markets in the world to come.
And thank you very much, Brian. We look forward to seeing you again in the spring. Brendan Marshall, thank you very much, sir. I hope you've enjoyed yourself as well.
Yeah, I always enjoy coming. It's a very good conversation. I mean, a lot of things, a lot of topics people don't realize. Even myself, being in agriculture, I follow the chemical thing quite a bit, and it's scary to think that atrazine, which has been around a long time, and I use a lot of it, but I use it at a reduced rate. And atrazine is a good product that makes other products stand out. And to lose it is a big fear for me moving forward in weed control.
Yeah. You make a great point. We're going to talk more about that on Monday. Brendan will be with me for our second roundtable, and we'll talk about that and a lot about Proposition. Lauren, is it Proposition 12 in California?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we're going to talk heavy about that. DeLoss Jahnke, your cheesecake has arrived, sir.
All right, so I'll be quick with this.
Yes.
By the way, so the first time I interviewed Lauren was the day the Farm Bill was signed, February 7, 14. I didn't know what to ask her. And then WOTUS came like a few months later, and we haven't had ever since then, we've had plenty to talk about.
Right.
But it has been, she's been a great asset. Wendell Shulman made a nice testimony at the event, is very well deserved. So I'm glad to have you here. Ron, when I go speak, I echo your comments. My message is we need you. Whomever it is, whatever form it is, we need involvement in agriculture because there's fewer of us, but the demands are still there, and it goes with school board and it goes with county community 4-H leader and all that. We need people. But I would also commend you. I commend you for your commitment to agriculture, and I commend you to commend you for your commitment to local radio. And I always like coming over here doing this. It's the fastest 2 hours in radio. It's always very informative, and enjoy it very much. So thank you for having me.
Keep up the good work, DeLoss. You do a fantastic job with RFD Radio Network. You can catch DeLoss on our station each and every day. All right. Thank you to the Patent Block Grill and Brew Pub. They've provided our cheeseburgers today. And Amy Thompson, past president with the Warren-Henderson Farm Bureau, she has brought wonderful desserts for us. So it takes a village. It's Prime Beef Festival week. Enjoy the weather. Enjoy the festival. So long from the Ag Roundtable at the Patent Block.